can make this a better process is vital, and that's what I hear you say.
Absolutely, absolutely.
There, absolutely. So, how does your role articulate with evaluation? How does evaluation fit into you?
As I started to mention a little bit before, with the praxis testing in particular, evaluation, just most recently, for example, the university is interested in understanding more about effective oral communication skills. Right. And so this process evaluation, which really relates to quality assurance, I've been facilitating that data collection and that evaluation within the College of Education. Sure. And then that will be, that's provided to the university level, and then that will play into further accountability measures such as the Southern Association of Colleges and Universities accreditation. That's another example. I mentioned about the U.S. News. Mm-hmm. We were talking a little bit about my previous role, which was just an assessment way up by the Canadian border at Plattsburgh. There, I was on an evaluation team where the local regional school systems got a $4 million grant, and this is a lot for the small area that it was, $1 million a year over 4 years, and there were 5 of us at the university that served as the evaluators for this Safe Schools, Healthy Students project. The schools were looking at ways, the regional schools, of making their elementary schools safer, and so my role, along with a few other colleagues at the university, was doing outcome evaluation of that process.
Oh, okay.
Another example, of course, we have program portfolio data briefs that provide a range of in the College of Ed that provide a range of information related to key assessments that then I have dialogues with program coordinators about what that key assessment information shows in terms of quality assurance, and is a particular program. I don't think we're ever quite where we want to be, because it's a process of continual improvement. But how can we use this information in an evaluative and a process sense for quality assurance and to grow further? One thing that just kind of popped into my mind, if I might say, oftentimes the evaluative process, even though I've worked in assessment a long time, for example, I don't know the content area of agricultural education, so it really takes a team effort for a successful evaluation, and in a variety of ways. And oftentimes you'll find that, I remember when I was with state education and assessment, and the evaluator for a particular data-driven program, really we were working side by side in a team way, would give me daily feedback about how the evaluation was going. So two messages: one, it's a team effort, even including the evaluator, him or herself, and that the evaluation given on some kind of an ongoing basis is relevant, because then adjustments can be made. So if you get all the way to the end, and it's just like a course, you get all the way to the end, you say, I had no idea,
it's too late.
It's too late.
Yeah, right.
But, and speaking from myself in courses I've taught, I like to sometimes just, ask, how's it going kind of early on, so I can make adjustments. Same thing with evaluation. But, and then most recently, I won't continue to ramble on here.
No, you're fine. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. With regard to evaluation, just recently the state of Alabama, as a result of a needs assessment evaluation that the state did, determined some major adjustments that were needed in terms of assessing not pre-service teachers, but teachers actually in the field with regard to the Alabama quality teaching standards. So the way that plays out in my work and evaluation is we're now needing to make some adjustments in our assessment instruments based upon the needs assessment that the state did, and making some adjustments in the whole interaction process between the supervisor, oftentimes the principal, and the teacher in the school. And so we want our students to have a similar model, a similar experience, so that they're not surprised when they get into school as to what that dialogue will be like. So I'm working with the assessment committee and the field experience committee and other faculty colleagues to figure out how to translate what this needs assessment found at the state level to improve the dialogue between the supervisor and the teachers, how we're going to translate that to be meaningful for our pre-service teachers and other clinical experiences. So I've been working on that. And by the way, you had mentioned formative and summative. The goal of this new system is that it becomes, instead of such a summative process or a more summative process, that it becomes more of a formative process, and that it's a process more of growing and learning, and not so much you got an A or a B or whatever it might be, or you're judged to be acceptable or above standard, but rather growth and having a broader sphere of influence in relation to helping other teachers and students. But it's more of a formative. The goal of this that came out of a needs assessment by the state is to provide a more formative type evaluation experience between the principal in many cases and the teacher. And so we're trying to figure out how do we translate that to something meaningful for our students so they're more prepared as they can be when they go in the field.
That's great. I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm teaching a supervision of instruction course this summer. I may need to have another conversation.
Well, I'll be glad. And by the way, you've been pretty modest too, I must say, because Dr. Parr is on our assessment committee, and I'm glad I have this opportunity to just thank you for your contributions to that committee. You've been very, very helpful.
Thank you. I do enjoy that. It's I think it's very beneficial, the committee. And Dr. Locke mentioned the new data collection tool, the TK20. I'm sure that our students are becoming more and more familiar with TK20, and I think that it's going to bring some opportunities to us that are, we've yet to realize.
Absolutely. And was actually one of the co-chairs of the assessment committee, I think was Dr. Darch, as I'm recalling, that suggested, and this is important in the context of evaluation, that we get some baseline measures as to how students and faculty are perceiving this new data management system. And so on the basis of Dr. Darch's suggestion and the committee's discussion then and your input, we designed an evaluation tool so that we got a baseline. Because one of the things that happens in evaluation sometimes is by the time you think about doing it, that critical point of when to take the best, at least the initial best measurement, has already passed. That's so we have really, we haven't let that slip by us. We have that initial measure, and we'll get other measures, and I'm confident that we'll see growth. And one of the nice things about TK22 is that it'll give us a further resource for our distance education students as well.
Absolutely. Well, I think that you have sufficiently answered my next question about the importance of evaluation and seeing this thing as something that's more, I guess, cyclical in nature than a one-shot deal where the evaluation forms the next steps, and then they're evaluated and informs the next steps. And so what advice might you offer if we're talking with teachers who are looking to evaluate their programs, evaluate the effectiveness, and what general advice could you give those people in those situations?
Sure. One thing I would say is to think about the boundaries that you're going to set. In other words, what are the purposes, and do you have clear boundaries for those purposes? And it's almost like the thinking of a microscope and focusing in on it, because if that first step isn't done, then it'll be much more difficult to determine the kinds of measures that would be most appropriate, and to relate the answers that you find as informing the question. So really having a strong understanding, a really good understanding of what's the purpose, what are the boundaries of those purposes, will serve as a foundation for the appropriate selection of the measurements and so forth. Actually, like when I'm thinking right now, actually, of like a research project, and I've done this from time to time, I must admit, where it'll be like, you don't want to be in the position where you've collected information that's good in a sense, but it's not really answering the questions that you sought to seek out, and it's very no statistical analysis can change either a limited design in terms of related to the purposes or actually, you know, if you don't have the questions that are necessary. So I would say, what are the boundaries? Think
Sure.
about that. I would also mention